Hey everyone, welcome to our deep dive into Vicky Dávila and her potential presidential run in Colombia. It's a big story and one that's clearly caught your attention. We're talking about someone who's spent her career as a journalist exposing corruption, and now she might be about to jump right into the heart of Colombian politics.
It's pretty wild, right? Especially when you think about what's going on in Colombia politically right now. Petro's administration is having a tough time, approval ratings are dropping, and people are getting more and more unhappy. And that's exactly the kind of environment where someone like Davila can really gain some traction.
Yeah, it does feel like we're at a turning point. We've got a ton of stuff here, articles, interviews, opinion pieces, and everyone's trying to figure out what a Dávila presidency would mean for Colombia. And honestly,
Right.
there's a lot of uncertainty, a lot of anxiety mixed in with the excitement.
That's not surprising at all. Davila is a polarizing figure. To be honest, she's always been a bit controversial in her work as an investigative journalist, particularly when she exposed that Comunidad del Anillo scandal involving the national police. Well, that made her a lot of admirers, but it also made her some enemies. So how do we even begin to understand all of this?
Maybe a good place to start is understanding how she got here, how she went from holding the powerful accountable to maybe becoming one of the most powerful people in Colombia.
Absolutely. Her career is really the key to understanding why she appeals to some people and, frankly, why others are worried about her leadership. She's never been afraid to speak her mind, but in the last few years, she's become even more vocal about national issues. She's using her platform to share opinions that really connect with a certain segment of the population, the people who are fed up with the way things are.
It's almost like she's speaking for those who feel like no one's listening,
Hmm.
to the people who think the system is rigged against them. And that kind of outsider appeal, especially when everyone's already unhappy with the politicians, well, it can be incredibly powerful.
For sure. But the big question is, can that same outsider perspective, that same confrontational style that works so well in journalism, can it work in the world of government?
And then you have to factor in the controversies. It would be irresponsible to talk about Davila's candidacy and not talk about the baggage she carries with her.
Mhm.
Her critics point to times when her reporting felt less about finding the truth and more about pushing an agenda.
Right. And those incidents, especially when she published private recordings without explaining the full context, they raise some serious concerns about her ethics as a journalist. And some people worry she'll bring that same approach to her political decisions.
It makes you wonder what motivates her more. Is it about exposing wrongdoing, or is it about getting power and using that power to make things go her way? And then, of course, there's her relationship with the Neco family, a very powerful and controversial dynasty in Colombia with a long history of corruption
Yeah.
allegations.
That connection raises some real red flags about conflicts of interest. Can she really be independent from the political establishment when she's so close to a family like that? It makes people wonder if she can be trusted to put the interests of all Colombians first, or if her decisions will be influenced by the people who helped her get to the top.
It's definitely something a lot of voters are going to be thinking about. And then you have the Trump factor. Davila has said she admires Donald Trump, especially his economic and social policies. That's raised some eyebrows and caused some anxiety. Would she try to do the same things in Colombia?
It's a question worth considering because the consequences could be huge. On the economic side, she might be drawn to things like tax cuts and protectionist trade policies. Those might sound good to some businesses, but they could also make Colombia's financial problems worse and hurt its ability to trade with other countries.
And on the social and political side, people are worried that if she adopts Trump's divisive rhetoric, it'll just make the existing divisions in Colombia worse. It could weaken democracy and lead to even more unrest.
Exactly. What happened in the U.S. during Trump's presidency is a cautionary tale for anyone who doesn't want to see the same thing happen in Colombia.
So we're starting to see this pattern emerge. The very things that made Davila a great journalist, her boldness, her outsider status, her willingness to challenge the system, those same things could be her weaknesses as a political leader.
It's a fascinating paradox, isn't it? And it makes this deep dive even more important. We need to take a really close look at both the potential and the risks of a Davila candidacy for Colombia. So welcome back to our deep dive into Vicky Dávila and whether she might actually run for president in Colombia. We've been talking about all the interesting and sometimes kind of troubling parts of her career and how her potential candidacy is making people nervous.
And yeah, a lot of the sources we've been looking at show just how much apprehension there is among Colombians. They see this woman who's been incredibly brave in uncovering corruption, and now they're wondering, is she really ready to run the country?
It's a good question. We're seeing a lot of skepticism from people who follow politics closely, analysts, commentators, even everyday people on social media. They admire her courage as a journalist, but they're not sure that translates into being able to govern a country.
Because governing is different.
Right.
It's not just about pointing out problems. It's about compromise, about working with other people, about navigating complicated systems.
Yeah. And a lot of people point out that Colombia is in a really delicate spot right now. The country can't afford to have a leader who's learning as they go, especially with all the economic and social challenges they're facing.
Her supporters say she's a fast learner, that she'll put together a team of experienced advisors, but her critics say that's not enough.
And then you add in her personality.
Right.
She's known for being very confrontational. In journalism, that was a good thing. It helped her expose wrongdoing. But diplomacy, building relationships with other countries, finding common ground, those things need a different approach.
Her critics worry that if she brings that same confrontational style to international relations, it could isolate Colombia. It could damage relationships with important allies. And they point to her admiration of Donald Trump, whose own style caused a lot of diplomatic problems. It makes them nervous.
It's like some Colombians are looking at what happened in the U.S. and thinking, we definitely don't want that here.
And that brings us to another big question. What are her actual plans? Besides criticizing the way things are, what does she actually want to do? We haven't seen a detailed plan from her yet, so it's hard to know what a Dávila presidency would actually look like.
That lack of information is definitely adding to the anxiety. People want to know, where does she stand on economic issues, social issues? What are her priorities? Those are the questions that are floating around out there, and without any answers, people get uneasy.
And then there's the whole Nieto family connection. It just hangs over everything. This incredibly powerful family with their own history of corruption allegations has been supporting Dávila, and a lot of people see that as proof that she's ultimately part of the same system she claims to be fighting against.
Her opponents are definitely using that against her. They say it undermines her whole image as an outsider, someone who's going to shake things up. They're saying she's not who she says she is.
It's kind of ironic, isn't it? She made her career by exposing corruption, and now those same tactics are being used against her.
It's definitely creating this feeling of unease. Even some of the people who admire her tenacity are starting to wonder if she's really the right person to lead Colombia.
But it's important to remember the context, too. Right? Petro's approval ratings are in the tank. People are disappointed. They feel like he hasn't delivered on his promises about inequality and peace.
That's true, and that creates an opportunity for someone like Dávila. She can tap into that dissatisfaction and present herself as the alternative, the outsider, who will actually make things better.
It's a classic political move.
Right.
Take advantage of people's frustrations and offer yourself as the solution. But it's risky, too. If she doesn't deliver on her promises, the disillusionment could become even worse.
It's a real tension that's playing out right now. People want solutions, but they're also afraid of getting fooled again. They've been let down before.
So they're looking at Vicky Dávila with this mix of hope and fear. Can she be the leader they need, or will she end up making things worse?
It's a tough question with no easy answer. But understanding all the different sides of the story, all the anxieties and the potential problems, that's really important for anyone who wants to be an informed voter.
And that's what we're trying to do here, to give you, the listener, the information you need to understand this potentially historic moment in Colombian politics. All right, so we're back for the final part of our deep dive into Vicky Dávila and her possible run for president of Colombia. We've talked about a lot, her incredible career in journalism, the controversies that have followed her, and we've really dug into the worries that a lot of Colombians have about her possibly becoming their leader.
It's been fascinating, hasn't it? Kind of a wild ride going through all the twists and turns of this story. And we've seen how the same things that made Dávila such a strong investigative journalist, that fearlessness, the willingness to take on powerful people, those could be the very things that trip her up in politics.
It really does feel like Colombia is at a crossroads right now. And the path they choose to take, well, it could have a huge impact on the future of the country. So for all of you listening, what are the big takeaways from this deep dive? What should you be keeping in mind as you think about Dávila as a potential president?
I think the biggest takeaway here is that Vicky Dávila is a gamble for Colombia. She's an outsider, someone who shakes things up. She's got a powerful story, and she connects with people who feel like the political system has failed them. But she's never actually run anything before. She's got that confrontational style, and she's got those controversies hanging over her head. And all of that raises some serious questions about whether she can actually lead a country with so many challenges.
It's almost like we're trying to hold two different pictures in our minds at the same time. On the one hand, you've got this image of a fearless leader who comes in, cleans house, gets rid of corruption, brings real change. But on the other hand, you've got this image of someone who's divisive, someone who makes things worse, who makes rash decisions, and leaves Colombia in a worse state than before.
And that's the choice Colombian voters have to make. They have to weigh the possibility of positive change against the very real risks that come with a Davila presidency. They have to look past the personality, the charisma, the tough talk, and really look at her policies, her experience, her ability to bring people together instead of dividing them.
We've tried to give you the information you need to make an informed decision. We've talked about the potential benefits, but also the serious concerns. We've gone over the controversies, the skepticism, the questions about her experience, her temperament, her ties to certain powerful figures.
And at the end of the day, it's up to each person to decide whether the potential rewards are worth the risk. There's no easy answer, no one right way to look at it.
So as we wrap things up here, we want to leave you with something to think about. Given everything we've talked about, do you think that Vicky Dávila's experience as an investigative journalist would make her a good leader for Colombia? Or would it end up holding her back, making it harder for her to govern effectively and fairly?
There's no right or wrong answer here. It's a complex question. But by really thinking about the information we've given you, weighing the evidence, considering different points of view, you can come to your own conclusions.
We hope you'll keep digging into this topic. Stay informed, talk to people. The future of Colombia is on the line, and every citizen has a part to play in shaping that future. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive. We'll see you next time.